turn this over to lead consultant here at New Signature, Christopher Sheridan.
Thank you, Ryan, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Windows 10 Enterprise Roadmap. So today we're going to talk kind of two different levels. One, we're going to talk about some speeds and feeds, talk about different features and functions, but then we're also going to talk a lot about the philosophical changes inside of Microsoft and the model moving forward for deploying Microsoft software that includes the OS and Office 2016, and sort of some of the changes that are coming to the mentality across the IT industry and how that plays into your Windows 10 roadmap to get from where you are today, either running 7, 8, or 8.1 to 2010, and how you're going to begin that process and some of those things that you may have to start thinking about that maybe you weren't before. I've said it a couple of times in different presentations I've done over the past few weeks and the webinars. Windows 10 is going to be every bit as revolutionary as Windows 95 was, and that's not just marketing. That's as someone who's lived through both ends of it. This is going to be a pretty big transition from inside of Microsoft. For those of you who have not taken the time to either get to attend in person at something like the various Microsoft events, Ignite and others, to see Satya Nadella speak either online or live, I would really recommend you take the time and see some of his presentations, because he is transforming Microsoft. There's been more of a culture shift inside of Microsoft over the past 2 years than there has been in the sort of previous 10 years put together. And Windows 10 is a big piece of that. When we look at that design concept, when we think about how we're going to roll this out, how we're going to manage it, and the thought process that went into it. So let's dive right in. When we think about that thought process, we think about sort of why Windows 10 and why all the changes. Really, it's about our convergence of home and work. It's about our increased mobility. It's about our need for extra security, and I call it the iOS factor, if you will, that ease of use, that expectation. I often joke, somewhere in my lifetime, IT became easy. Any of you on the call who are, IT directors or work on a help desk or ever have, back in the day, I could walk up to a user and say, I have to go recalibrate the flux capacitor to 1.21 gigawatts. I'll be right back. And they would nod and smile and go, oh my God, he's really smart. And you could get away with things like that. But the everyday user today is so much more sophisticated than where we were. But on the other hand, they also have an expectation of that ease of use. Things have become so much easier. When we think about our migrations, when we think about our transition from software A to software B, regardless of what it is, it really boils down to a cost-benefit analysis, right? What are the new features and functions? What's the benefit I'm going to get out of it? Versus what is the cost, or BS, that I have to go through to get from point A to point B. And if I, as an IT person or a CFO or CEO, dictate that there is enough benefit to put up with whatever cost there is, whether it be financial, time, training, or otherwise, then we move forward. And the problem is a lot of people haven't seen that benefit in a lot of the applications, or they haven't seen enough benefit to overcome the BS. Over the years, that cost, that time and energy spent, people are less willing to do it. If we go back to 1995, right, Windows 95 launches, everybody upgrades, nobody skips. Windows 98 launches, NT as well. Everybody upgrades, nobody skips. People go to one platform or the other. Windows 2000 comes out. We're not going to talk about ME. ME was a marketing pack gone awry for Windows 98. But Windows 2000 comes out. Everybody upgrades, nobody skips. And then Windows XP comes out. Everybody upgrades, nobody skips. You see a pattern here. Over an 8-year stretch, we upgraded the OS 4 times. Every 2.5 years, we were upgrading the OS. It was a really exciting time, and when you think about the UI on each of those, it was very different, and we never really got any pushback because it was just the expectation that this was hard and I was going to have to spend time. Now, people don't accept that anymore. And again, go back to that iOS factor, right? If you think about an iOS device, an Apple device today, when I'm doing these live, I often ask the crowd, who's done an iOS upgrade, who has an iPhone or an Android or an iPad and has done an OS upgrade. What does it look like? You go to General, Settings, hit Update. Wait 20 minutes, come back, all your apps are still there. You don't have to reload anything. 8.0.1 bricked a bunch of phones, but only if they were jailbroken. It's an easy transition. So Microsoft and Satya have seen that over the years. When we think about today, there's two things Microsoft can do to help customers stay innovative, to stay on the current version. One is to add more benefit, to add more features, to find that killer app or that killer feature that your company needs that will help you be more productive, help you make more money, help you be more efficient. The other is to reduce the cost, to reduce that pain and anguish of migrating. Now, we've seen that with Office 365 already, right, on the Exchange side. If your Exchange migration goes from 200 hours to 10 hours, going from one version to another within Office 365, once you're up there, that's a huge reduction in burden, which makes you far more likely to migrate, right, and eventually everyone migrates, right? And they don't even really have to force people because the reduction in cost is so great from a labor and energy standpoint. Windows 10 is going that same model. We want to go that same mentality. We want to reduce the burden of what an OS migration looks like so that we don't have people running on Windows 7, which, by the way, Windows 7 was end of basic support January of this year. Windows 7, there's no more feature updates. There's no more, all that's coming is security patches, right? It is completely end of basic support and has been for many months. So that's the goal. That's the mindset moving forward is let's reduce the cost. Let's reduce that burden of migrating and take that environment we have today and migrate. So a big piece of that is work is no longer a location. What do we mean by that? People work from anywhere. I'm working from home today. I work from home 90% of the time. Most of New Signature does. More and more companies are working remotely. The challenge always has been working remotely is security, right? The enemy of security is mobility and vice versa. So Microsoft has really taken that into account in all of their applications moving forward. At some point, we'll do some information on Office 2016 as we get closer to launch. You'll see it there. But for Windows as well, it's really about doing that. And then BYOD, bring your own device. I love when I walk into an organization and they tell me, oh, we don't allow people to bring their own devices here at this company. It's only corporate assets. And then my first question is, let's go walk around the executive floor. And do you think we're going to find a device that has been connected to your network that is a personal device from one of the executives? And the answer is always yes. Well, so you're violating your own policy. And the minute you let one device in, you have to have a policy and set of controls. So how do we do all of that? How do we manage all of this? And then when we think about that experience, once we've enabled them to be mobile, how do we get them the right information? There's a concept that started in 2013 and is really maturing now in 2016 and Windows 10 around the right information to the right person at the right time, regardless of device. If you've attended webinars I've done in the past, you've heard me say that phrase before. I'm going to say it again because it is really key to take away. The right information to the right user at the right time, regardless of device. Meaning we need to get that user their information wherever they are so they can get their job done. I don't care where you are. I don't care that you're on an iOS device. I don't care that you're on a Surface tablet. I don't care that you're on your Android phone. You need to get the data you need to get your job done. And how can I, as much as possible, enable that? So we really need to connect and get people that data. And then when we think about that data, how do we lock it down, right? And that last one there, employees are accessing sensitive data. Such as customer information, intellectual property, things like that, right, remotely. They need access to that data even when they're remote. And what are those things that we have in place? Windows 10 is designed to work with all of the other applications, such as SharePoint, different components of Office 365, rights management, server, Azure Active Directory. We're going to see a lot of that it's designed to work with all these applications, so I have that seamless security model all the way from the desktop back up in through the cloud so that I can be as mobile as I need to. All right, so when we think about that mobility tapestry, we think about it, there's three components, right? The device, the app, and the data, right? How do I secure them? And this is where Microsoft has really changed in the past few years. Through Office 365 and just through all of their applications, we have this thing called the Office Graph. And it's a way that all of the applications become aware of each other. Well, Windows 10 is kind of becoming part of that, in that we want it to be aware of all of the other components so that I'm not working on an island, that the security and controls I set up in Exchange or SharePoint flow through Outlook or any other application you use and then flow through the desktop environment as well. So no matter how you're accessing that data, that security model is going to flow through each and every layer. We've seen some of the progress already in the announcements in Office 365 where they've brought some of the DLP, the data loss prevention rules, from Exchange 2013 and Office 365 to SharePoint. And those same rules you set up in one flow to the other. Well, now we're going to introduce Windows 10 as part of that equation as well, so that that same control and flow of data moves through. We're going to see that as we move through. So what are customers telling us? So there's the idea and the roadmap of the world. What are we hearing from customers? Passwords are not enough. Single factor is not enough. How do I protect data? How do I secure data? How do I keep it from walking out the door when people are mobile? How do I empower people to work remotely? And then the biggest one, how do I do all this cost effectively and manage it? Now, it's funny, the one we're not hearing from customers a lot, or we don't hear it until we bring it up, is how do I make this easy for the end user? How do I make it so that they want to do it, right? When we think about, I often translate, let's take Facebook or Twitter or an iPad. Think about how many of your users in your company use Facebook or use an iPad or use Twitter. Did you sit them down and give them 2 hours of corporate training? Did they attend a class? Did they receive any sort of formal education on it? No, they figured it out. Why? All boils down to cost-benefit analysis. They perceived a benefit to them, which was I want to be able to communicate with my friends and family. And so therefore, it is worth the time and energy I'm going to learn. And we all have that one relative, oh, I don't bother with it, it's too complicated, it's not, right? Their cost-benefit analysis has come out on the negative side. So they don't do it for one reason or another. Oh, I don't want to be bothered by people, whatever it is. The same goes through, you have to think about that cost-benefit analysis when we think about the OS. Why was Windows 8 not embraced or loved? Windows 8 and 8.1. It's very simple. The new Touch UI that Windows 8 introduced was fantastic if you had a touch-based screen. It was designed for a Touch UI. Microsoft, rightly I might add, predicted that at some point in the near-term future, every device is going to be a touch device. And that's a true statement. I would think everybody on this call would agree with that statement fundamentally. Now, we may argue as to when, right? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. At some point, every device is going to be a touch device, but it's going to take some period of time to get there. The trick is at Windows 8 launch, only 5% of machines were touch. So if you think about from a purely user perspective, let's forget the back office improvements that were there for IT professionals. If you're a user, the standard desktop on Windows 8 and 8.1 looks just like 7. It functions just like 7. Therefore, there's no real benefit. There's no change. There's no benefit. There's no detriment. It's net neutral. The start button changed and was different. But unless you had a touch screen, there was no benefit. So even though I could argue on a scale of 1 to 100 that the cost may have only been a 5, as far as training or education or time needed to be invested to learn it and get used to it, the benefit was 0 unless you had a touch screen. Therefore, the formula comes out a negative, and therefore users don't embrace it. And when you talk to people who are either IT professionals and are aware of the back-end benefits of Windows 8 and 8.1, they embraced it because they saw benefit, or those users who had a touch screen or a Surface tablet, they embraced it, they loved it because there was a perceived benefit. Hence, Windows 10 has really taken that benefit to the employee to a new height. And there's a lot of that you can't discount because, again, think of it in the context of the iOS device. Why did Apple win the cell phone war, 6 years ago, 7 years ago? Why are they still one of the dominant players in the war, and why are they now starting to lose ground to Android? It's the same reason. It's the apps. When you think about your mobile phones, what do? They do mail, calendar. From a work standpoint, they do mail, calendar, tasks, right? They have a web browser, right? They all have the same features and functions. So what's their differentiator? Well, iOS's initial differentiator was its integration with iTunes, right? Oh, I can get rid of my iPod, and remember iPods? It's amazing how quickly we forget technology. You can have your iPod, and you can get rid of that and have one device and carry only one thing. And that was a great benefit. That was the killer app. And now you throw out things like Clash of Clans and Angry Birds, and we all laugh, but that's the reason it wins. That's the reason it trumps the other devices. And that's where Android, because it now has Angry Birds and Clash of Clans and all these other great apps that are outside of work, that you're getting that converged device. That's why people want them. And that's what's killed the Windows mobile phone, right, is the lack of applications. If we could find that killer app that drove people and people really wanted, then it would be on par with the rest of them. It would come up to snuff, right? So Windows 10 is that same mindset. What's that killer app? What's that thing that we're going to deliver to the user that's going to make them really, really want this? So we're going to talk about some of that consumer side stuff too, because you understand that's going to factor into this and factor into that desire for people to have it. So that key is that personal computing, right? To take that Windows platform that people have been used to for so long and bring a lot of the experiences and functionality that people want to that environment. So the biggest thing is to converge the platform and have that same platform across any device, whether it be your phone, your laptop, your tablet or phablets, your all-in-one versus your Xbox, right? That's one feature a lot of people don't realize. The Xbox One is upgraded. It's already running on the same kernel as Windows 10, and it is going to be full bore Windows 10 once it's fully released. So every device is going to be running Windows 10. That means an application that runs on my PC can run on my Xbox and can run on my phone, assuming it has processing power, right? You're not going to run AutoCAD on your phone, obviously, but in theory, if it had enough processor and RAM, you could. So that's the idea, is one converged Windows platform. So that from a user perspective, we're going to simplify the world and make it one look and feel, one set of applications across all devices. This does two things. One, it makes it easier on the user. Two, it makes it easier on developers. If you write an Xbox One game, people can play that on the PC. If you write a PC game or a PC app, people can run it on their phone or on their Xbox, etc., etc. So now as a developer, I'm much more incented to write an application for the Windows platform because it'll run on multiple platforms and devices, and I can get multiple types of users and user bases if I wanted to. The other side of this is what we call that work-life balance, or that bring your own device type world mentality. I can play my Xbox games on my PC. For those of you who work for very security conscious companies, this is going to be something else you're going to have to block on the firewall, because if I have Madden 15 downloaded on my Xbox, I can plug in an Xbox controller to my laptop, connect to my Xbox, and play Madden 15. With my buddy who's on the controller and on the TV screen. I can be playing from my controller and my laptop. No more seeing the plays the other person picks. And we all kind of laugh at that. We all kind of say, well, Chris, what does any of this have anything to do with corporate security or corporate, use or that? It drives adoption, right? It drives people to the platform. It drives people to want to learn and make use of the platform because you have this one converged thing. It also starts introducing all sorts of interesting applications. Think about a low-budget conference room system. You could use an Xbox running the Skype for Business client as a low-cost conference room system, because the Kinect is a high-def camera. An Xbox One with a Kinect and a decent-sized screen running the Skype for Business client, voila, you have a low-cost conference room system, right? There's also these great solutions that we can think of. If you ever get a chance to visit any of the Microsoft Envisioning Centers, you'll see some of these solutions that they have in there that various companies have done that utilize the Xbox. And then we open it up to things like HoloLens, due out later this year, of taking it to 3D graphical technology, right? There's all sorts of wonderful corporate examples for HoloLens, but the best one they've done yet, to my opinion, is the Minecraft version. Again, any of you who have young children, show them the Minecraft video from E3 of HoloLens and the interaction from HoloLens to that, to give you an idea of what it's capable of. It's absolutely amazing. So then when we think about translating that to business, it really breaks down into a couple different areas we'll run through here, right? Protection, management, productivity, and devices, right? Giving people what they want. And if you think about the first two, those are really for IT. That middle one is really for the third one's for management, and the last one's for the users. So let's run through those. So we think about continually managed. Now this is where the management and deployment of Windows is going to change. We talked about that sort of iOS mentality of OS migrations. That is exactly how Windows 10 is going to work. Microsoft has made several statements about Windows 10 being kind of the last big OS they want to roll out. They don't want to do a big launch like this again for quite some time. Personal opinion, haven't seen it in writing anywhere, I think that's why they went from 9 to 10. In reality, because if you're going to stick on a name for an extended period of time, Windows 10 is a great name, or Windows X is a great name to stick with. Just look at the Mac OS, right? Or in what, 10.6.1 or 10.6.8 or whatever it is right now for the Mac OS. So when we teach sort of the MCDST classes, right, the Windows desktop certification classes, the first thing you teach people is how to do an in-place upgrade, because it's a huge part of the exam. And then you immediately tell them, if I ever catch you doing this in the field, I'll break both your thumbs, because we don't do it that way. We re-image the desktop. Well, that ends with Windows 10. There is in 2 to 3 years, you will not be re-imaging PCs any longer. Depending on when you roll out Windows 10, that will be the end of your OS imaging. You can do a direct in-place upgrade from Windows 7, 8, or 8.1 directly to 10. If you haven't done it already, again, as a homework assignment to everybody on the call, if you haven't, the Windows Insider program is still there. You can still, even though we're 2 weeks from launch, you can still go download the Insider version to trial it. Or if you want to wait the 2 weeks till or week and a half now to the 29th and just launch it then, that's fine as well. Do an in-place upgrade, see how it works. I personally have done about 50 of them to this point from various systems, including Surface Pro 1s, the initial Surface Pro, all the way up through more modern desktops. I've done it on every type of hardware form factor to test that it works, and it does. So you can do that in-place upgrade. And then it's that continued upgrade and continued management of the environment, meaning no more big OS launches, right? Every couple of months, we're going to come out with an update pack, right? A new set of features, a new piece of functionality. And just like iOS, they're not going to wait for these big launches. You're going to get 10.0.1 and 10.0.2 and 10.1, et cetera, that are going to come out. So the other big thing I say to companies who are heavily regulated, SOX compliant, et cetera, make sure you have your policy and procedures for testing in place, because the updates are going to come fast and furious. Now, just like every other Windows update, you are going to have the ability to stage them, delay them, not roll them out right away. So you're still going to have your group policy management, your WMI management, all of your things, but the biggest one is going to be that continuous update and keeping it up to date. Going from one version to another should be a 10-minute process. I've done it now through the Insider program. I think I launched it the day it came out. I'm on my 15th build through the Insider program since the beta initially launched. And each time, I set my reboot for midnight. It downloads the update. I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning and it's installed, and all my apps are still there, all my settings are still there. I don't have to reinstall, reconfigure my certificates for my VPNs. I don't have to reconfigure my printers, none of it. It's all still there, right? So when you think about that rebuild process, it's going to be much easier to keep Windows up to date. And that's really the key, is that innovation, keeping it up to date. And so we just talked about this a lot, that reimage deployment, right? Reducing the costs of validation, keeping uptime, reducing deployment costs. And those deployment costs aren't just dollars, right? It's really that time and energy you're going to spend. Do that managed in-place upgrade. No more reimaging. I can't state enough. This model is translating to other applications. Office 2016, as an example, is this same model. Skype for Business is working on the same model from a server side. Skype for Business on the server side is the first one where they've said, no, you can do an in-place upgrade, and here's how. And here's how the in-place upgrade is going to work with Skype for Business. Now, on the server side, we're still getting used to it. It's not as common as, say, the iOS devices and sort of the desktop environment. But when you think about the major OSs out there today, Windows is really kind of the last one doing this. This is the way of the future. This is the way that all OSs should be done moving forward. So we're really going to have to mandate that. Again, the whole benefit to Microsoft for this is, how many of you out there are still running Windows 7 or Office 2007 or Exchange 07 or, one of those applications, or 10, right? Exchange 2010 is 5 years old. And when I say innovative companies, what companies come to mind? And I bet you most of you are going through the list in your head, and Microsoft is not one of them, right? The companies that jump out are usually Amazon, Oracle, Apple, Google, but it's not Microsoft. Why is that? Well, because everybody's running Exchange 07 or Office 07 or Windows 7, and it hasn't changed in 5, 6, 7 years. So, of course, it's not innovative. So by reducing that cost, we can keep you on the latest and greatest easier, and therefore keep it innovative and keep adding those features and functions. Just as a side note, we've learned that Office 2016 is going to be in a 4-month release cycle moving forward, right? So once it's fully launched this fall, it will go on to a 4-month release cycle for updates, for major updates. And in fact, they're only going to be doing security updates 2 versions back, meaning Release A comes out in January, Release B comes out in May, Release C will come out then maybe that September, October, and when Release C launches, Release A is no longer supported. So it's going to be an 8-month window for keeping it up to date. Now, granted, you'll have some time because 2010 and 13 will still be supported for a period of time after its release, but at some point, that's going to be the new wave, and we're going to have an 8-month cycle for Office. And the same with Windows. We're going to have these updates, and you're really going to have to be on top of your game from a testing and procedure standpoint. The other big thing is about identity and security. So taking that advantage of things like Azure Active Directory and multi-factor authentication with things like phone factor. So those of you who have ever used Azure or some of the other Microsoft services are familiar with things like phone factor, where we can have your cell phone act as an RSA token and either generate or receive a 6-digit code, or we can dial the user and have them enter a PIN to do our multi-factor authentication so that it's more than just password. Well, that's coming right into the base OS. It's coming into all the Office applications as well, so that I can secure the desktop environment right down, to multi-factor authentication through encryption, making use of all of those things in the cloud. Again, enabling people to be more mobile. When you think of new signature, right now, the only thing we still have on-premise is our Skype for Business environment because it's not a fully hosted PBX yet. That launches later on this year. And once that's fully launched, then we'll be 100% cloud. We'll have no more infrastructure on-prem because we can run everything in the cloud. Our ERP, our payroll system are all SaaS-based applications. We're on Office 365. Our PBX will be in the cloud. Everything will be cloud-based, including our Active Directory, so that no longer are we tied to a physical location. We can work from wherever, whenever. Then we think about that business store, right? We think about this started in Windows 8, connecting the store application or doing this concept of a managed store where we can either push or allow to be pulled application. So again, think of the Android store or iOS store. Imagine if instead of that we disable those and instead point people to the company store or company management application, and we can proxy whatever apps we want from the regular Windows store into the user's environment, or publish our own MSIs or other things to make it more of a self-service model. Think about your desktop reimaging today. So today you get a brand new machine. You put your base golden image on it. Takes X number of hours, depending on how efficient your reimaging software is in your network. You then have to either customize that image based on the department, or you maintain multiple golden images, maybe one for finance, one for HR, et cetera, et cetera. In either case, you have to do some form of customization to that user's environment. Then you have to make sure everything's works, set up printers, all of that. Then the user has to take that machine, and let's say they're a repeat user, it's a new machine for them. Then they have to reset up all their own things. They like the ribbon bar on the right side, not on the bottom. They're left-handed, so they set their mouse to left-handed. Whatever other features they set up. Wouldn't it be great if that profile followed them everywhere, and if their apps follow them everywhere, and 2 weeks into the job, oh, IT forgot to install AutoCAD or forgot to install some other application that I need. I just go into the company store and self-service grab it. It's a model all your users are used to. Let's bring that to the Windows environment and enable it. When we think about managing that, we talked about a lot of these different things. The biggest part is that bottom one: keep your devices secure and up to date, regardless of where they are. That's where things like Intune or System Center come in big, but you don't even have to have those. You can do it through group policy and through your regular device management, but then Microsoft's baking a lot of the stuff into Office 365 directly. So you're seeing all that integration now between the various applications. So now we think about that productivity from a management standpoint, right? The big one is that easy-to-use Windows 7 look and feel from a start bar, right? Microsoft heard loud and clear. People hated the start bar. They changed it a little bit in 8.1. They've changed it even further in Windows 10. And Windows 10 is a blending of Windows 7 and Windows 8, where you still have the smart tiles. You still have that ease of use if you want those from a touch standpoint, but it's also putting back the start bar a little bit more the way people are used to in Windows 7. It boots directly to the desktop. Things that will make people more comfortable. When it says increasing user productivity, that to me really means minimizing the learning, minimizing the change to them from what they're doing today. That's the big key there. So whatever device they're on, we're going to bring that information to them and present it to them in the best way possible. The biggest feature that exists are, I have a Surface tablet, right? I'm doing this webinar today from my Dell, but I also have a Surface tablet. One of the best features of Windows 10 is it detects when there's a keyboard and mouse present. So when I have a keyboard and mouse plugged into my machine, it is in regular, what I will call classic mode, right? That standard start button. I have smart tiles enabled, but it doesn't take up the full screen. The minute I detach the keyboard, it immediately swaps to, or prompts me if I would like to swap to tablet mode. What does that do? Well, that changes the appearance of the start bar and then moves to more of a Windows 8 look and feel of that traditional Windows 8 large tiles, things more at your thumb application. It goes into stuff like Office and makes all the icons just a titch bigger, so that in Office it's easier to use the touch interface. That's really a big key. It's a tablet when you need it and a laptop when you want it, because these two-in-one devices are gaining in popularity, right? If you think about not just the Surface tablet, but any of the two-in-ones from any of the manufacturers, those are really the devices Microsoft is seeing gain the most traction for the users. So definitely something to think about when you look at the moving forward, but that auto detect feature is huge. And then some universal apps that we're Microsoft is publishing, right? So they're publishing different applications that are going to have the same look and feel across all the applications. So here's an example of a dashboard application that was made. Microsoft has also made it very easy for partners and ISVs to write these applications and write custom apps for you. Think about a manufacturing plant. So you have a piece of software today in your manufacturing environment that monitors all your manufacturing equipment on the floor. And it's a web interface you go to that the floor manager can go in and see, the heat, the temperature of any of the machines, if they need maintenance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, instead of that being a web-based application, wouldn't it be great if I had an app that showed me all my people who are supposed to be on shift, when people are due breaks, oh yeah, and over here on the side, slidable back and forth, the status of all my machines, red, green, yellow. Taking that type of data from another application and creating a modern UI app has become much easier to do. So we now have these universal apps that, you could be on your phone, your tablet, or your desktop and gain those insights. Again, trying to help you find that killer app. And the same is true of Office. Office 2016 is going to be the same experience across all the devices, built for touch and mobile, making it very easy to utilize both the browser-based versions, but as well as the phone-based versions of the application and get that same look and feel across all your devices. Think about editing a Word document on your Xbox with a keyboard for the Xbox, right? So when you think about something like Outlook, right, that new look and feel for Outlook as it's part of Windows. The other big change from an application and productivity standpoint is, in fact, the death of Internet Explorer. So at launch, it's going to have both IE11 and then Microsoft Edge, which is the new browser Microsoft is writing. It's a complete rewrite of the browser from the ground up, but Internet Explorer is going away. The key things to note with Edge, it's being built on open standards, Web 2.0 standards, to utilize as much of the Internet as possible and make it much more agnostic when it comes to third-party applications. I've talked to a lot of organizations today who are dealing with browser problems reminiscent of 1995-96. If you were around to remember the Netscape IE wars back in the day, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and IE were having that problem now. I was dealing with one company, their ERP suggested they run IE 8, but their, production application wanted this version of Chrome, but this application recommended Firefox this version. And while they may work in the others, they might have issues, and it's not the best practices or what they tell you. If you call up their support, they tell you to swap to that browser and use that one. So as a user, you've now got 3 different browsers. You're trying to remember which one to use for what, and it gets very complicated. And so what Microsoft, believe it or not, is trying to do is come back to the middle, come back to that web standard, Web 2.0 standard, HTML5. Let's build it on standards so that all of these applications, as long as the company making that app builds it off of standards, we'll be able to support it and it will work fine in our browser. And we'll be able to introduce all sorts of great new features which are standard in Web 2.0 and HTML5. So again, that's a big shift, and because we're seeing that more and more now when we talk about Chrome or Firefox and the issues there. So again, when we think about those things we talked, bringing the start button back, having the same look and feel across all your devices, having those same apps. When we think about that innovation for devices and security, right? So when we think about the different form factors, this is one of the things, you can have any iPad you want as long as it's one of the 2 or 3 form factors that Apple puts out. Microsoft has always taken a different track where they want their partners to make it. Even though they're making the Surface, Microsoft is perfectly content if you want to use the HP or the Dell or whatever manufacturer that you happen to really like their form factor, whether it's an 8-inch, phone to a, sort of 12-inch phablet, as they're called, through a tablet, through a traditional laptop or desktop. Microsoft doesn't care. We want to make that experience whatever your users need. Again, go back to that manufacturing example. Walking around the manufacturing floor is a lot easier with a slightly smaller tablet that I could carry, or maybe even a phone that I can put in my pocket, versus a full-on tablet or laptop, versus I need something more powerful. In my particular example for myself, I have two devices. I have a Dell 6700, which is, my Big Bertha, I call her. That is, the 17-inch screen, 2 quad cores. I've got 32 gigs of RAM in it. It's a beast, and it weighs 20, 30 pounds. And then I have my Surface, which is the device I take when I'm going on the road, when I'm really more mobile. The laptop stays in the home office. If I'm going to go work on the couch, I'll probably take that. But if I'm going traveling down to New York, or if I'm going to the Microsoft Office for the day, I take my Surface device because it weighs much less and it's a much better device for me. So depending on the user profile, depending on who you are or how you work, different devices may be your thing. So Microsoft really wants to open that up. So again, the two-in-ones, though, are the ones I see really taking off because it's that great combo of best of both worlds. So whether it's the Surface or the two-in-ones are the ones that are really, really going gangbusters. And the key is there's a bunch of business-ready devices, right? When we think of kiosk-based devices, we are going to have some different form factors from various manufacturers. And this also comes into that concept of Windows 10 being quote-unquote free. And I put it in quotations. We're going to talk about that in a second because it's free for people to upgrade to Windows 10. Why is that key? Because when you think about, say, a Surface tablet versus an iOS device, when you compare costs, the Surface tablet is more money. Why? Well, it has a better processor, has more RAM, right? It's capable of doing much more than an iOS device, so it's got stronger guts. That's one thing that drives up the cost. The other is the licensing for the OS, right? There is, even to Microsoft internal, there's a chargeback for the OS licenses. So when you think about that, if we can reduce that, well, that can help reduce the cost of the devices, mitigate some of that, and make them more affordable to put out. Now, when we say that Windows 10 is free, for those of you who are familiar with video games, it's really going into what's called a DLC mode, right? Downloadable content mode. Any video game junkies will be intimately familiar with that term, but it's going into a DLC mode. What that really means is, yes, Windows 10 is free. Oh, you want to use these really advanced features, BitLocker or AppLocker, or you want to run advanced group policies on it. Well, in that case, you need the enterprise version. You need that enterprise license, and you're going to unlock that by entering in the license code from your enterprise agreement. So for those who are consumer grade or consumer class type devices, where maybe we don't need to join it to the domain, or it's a BYOD device, great, free for them. And for enterprise customers who are going to need those advanced features, you have it on your enterprise agreement today, and that Windows license will carry through, which will give you access to all those advanced features that, say, an average home user isn't going to need, right? So again, finding that best of both worlds, but that it's going to be unlockable content based on having that code. So the other big thing is going to be integration with some different, when we think about different form factors, the Surface Hub. The Surface Hub is taking room systems, sort of that concept of the Link or Skype for Business room systems, and taking it to the next level, where it's an in-room system where we can brainstorm with people remotely, engage people, share applications, much like I'm doing today through Skype for Business, but in a room setting where it's aware of who you are. So you're in conference room A, you're whiteboarding out with your team. One person's working from home, the rest of the team's in the room. One person's remote on video, you're diagramming stuff out, doing your Venn diagram, whatever it is you're doing, planning out your architecture, and then all of a sudden your meeting time ends and you get kicked out of that room. Today, what do? You pull out your phone, you take photos of the whiteboard. There's actually applications out there for that, etc. Wouldn't it be great if you just saved that, walked into the next room, and it knew who you were, and when you walked in, it just loaded up your whiteboard again, and there it is. It followed you from conference room A to conference room B, or to your desktop, or to wherever you're going. So that Surface Hub is going to start bringing all of those meetings and all of those people and interactions together. Because again, the more remote we get, the harder it becomes to connect and collaborate. And video is a big part of that, because when we think about our employees, if anybody's on the calls from HR, hopefully you can back me up on this with your colleagues when you talk about this. One of the biggest metrics that HR checks for employee satisfaction is one simple question: Can the employee identify that they have someone they would call a friend at the company? If they answer positively to that question, say, yes, I have someone at this organization I would deem a friend, their employment satisfaction, their satisfaction with their pay, their satisfaction with their overall job and responsibilities and the company goes up 20, 30, 40, 50%. I forget the latest statistic on it, but it goes up quite a bit if they can identify they have a friend. But in a more mobile workforce, how do we connect with our colleagues and build that trust relationship and build that friend relationship? And it's through video, it's through collaboration, it's feeling like you're part of the team. So by integrating these Surface Hub devices in with our Windows 10 and Skype for Business and Office 365 and Yammer and all these different tools now we're going to put out there for people to collaborate and connect and be social, right? That's going to really help our organization. I can tell you that one of my colleagues, I happen to be a scout leader, one of my colleagues, his son made second class in Boy Scouts. My son just made first class. Our boys are similar in age. How do I know that? We happened to have a call this morning. We did video. We were chatting away, and my son happened to come in the room while I was on the call. It was just an internal call, so I let my son come into the office while I was on it, and it sparked a conversation. That's a bonding experience. That's a connection I now have with my colleague that brings us closer together. He's also a scout dad. He understands, right? He lives in Pennsylvania, right? That's now a bond, though, that he and I have. We've never been in the same room, never been in the same state together, yet I have a connection and a social relationship with him now. Then we introduce Hololens as the virtualization or 3D technology that we're going to, holographic technology that we're going to introduce. And when we think about those business applications, it's really just going to open up the ability for people to connect and collaborate and start interacting with data in a much more meaningful fashion. As I said earlier, not the least of which that makes Minecraft look really, really cool. So when we think about these different devices, we're really bringing stuff that users want, right? Users have a demand for. People want that look and feel. People want that environment. People want to have some choice and some flexibility. So we're going to grant them that. But we're still going to have that same management and control and security, whether it's encrypting the device, doing multi-factor authentication, or any of the other security or controls that we need to do as an IT organization. So when we think about those innovations for business, there's a lot more we can go through. I could do a 3-hour presentation on Windows 10 when we think about, hardware security, when we think about better malware protection, we think about secure booting, we think about end of wipe and replacing of devices and doing that ease of use. When we think about that profile, right, roaming profiles on steroids now, where it's funny. So if I have my video turned off today, I actually have a case, I pinched a nerve in my back. Why do I tell you that? Well, because I can't use my right arm, and I happen to be right-handed. So I'm not able to work as efficiently as I normally do. I swapped my mouse to left-handed so I can use my left hand for my mouse. I did that on my Surface tablet. 5 minutes later, I went over to my Dell to begin prepping for the webinar because I was going to do it from my Dell. And I immediately went to use the pad and right-click on something. Turns out, well, my profile, it flowed right through. So my mouse on my other device automatically swapped to left-handed because I had swapped it on the first device. Now you can choose what synchronizes, but think about that little thing. If someone's left-handed, they set it up once on one device. Now any device they log into, it's automatically going to swap the mouse to left-handed for them because it knows them and it's following them. Think about the power of that. Think about the power of that ease of use and that setup when I go from device A to device B. So the last piece I'll sort of add before I come off that slide is stuff like Cortana, right? So for those of you who haven't seen Cortana, Cortana is Microsoft's sort of answer to Siri, but it's really taking it to the next level. When we think about Siri and we think about that, great, I can get directions, I can set reminders, I can ask it funny Easter egg questions, that's great. What Cortana is doing, though, is taking it to that next level, and with Windows 10, Cortana is now able to be connected to your Office 365 environment and your Power BI environment. Microsoft demonstrated at Ignite a few months back on May 3rd, the ability that they're going to release. It won't come out day one, but it's set in the first release that's due out, the first update later on this fall / winter, of connecting Cortana to Power BI. So instead of just asking it cute things like, hey, what's the weather out today? Or, hey, can you remind me to do this? All useful things. You could now say, hey, what's our sales forecast for the fourth quarter? And as long as you have permissions to some sort of data set somewhere in your Power BI environment, it will go off and do that search and return results to the desktop for your sales forecast and give you some, hey, here's some Excel spreadsheets and some things I found that relate to the sales forecast. Here's some bar graphs. Here's that data you're looking for. Right? So think about introducing things like Power BI or introducing any of those features or functions. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of things that they'll be able to do of integrating Cortana. I like to throw in the reference of Scotty from Star Trek, Star Trek 4 talking to the computer, right? We're really going to have that day coming up where that's going to be a reality. So as we wind down, we kind of went through these various pieces. Hopefully, we've started to give you an idea of some of the various components of what's coming. From a homework assignment, please go out, download Windows 10. Do an in-place upgrade from Windows 7. Do an in-place upgrade from 8 or 8.1. Do it from an old piece of equipment. Not like something modern that you think should be running it great. Do it from a Surface Pro 1 or 2. Do it from a laptop that's a couple of years old. See how well it works. See how well that in-place upgrade works. Test your applications. Everything that works in 7 should work in 10. There should be no application compatibility issues, right? Because it's the same core code from an application standpoint. Go and do those tests to make sure you're ready. It's set to drop in 2 weeks. It's really the way Microsoft is moving, and they're going to get a lot more aggressive about these updates and these features moving forward. So you need to be ready as an IT organization. And that's where we're going to spend a lot of time with customers over the coming months as New Signature in helping them get ready for making sure their testing matrix is good, making sure that they have a good plan in place for how to update, that they have a great deployment methodology for these updates, and that their WSUS and upgrades are set to go. So hopefully through the last 54 minutes, I've given you a good taste of what to look for Windows 10. You really can't separate Windows 10, though, from Office 365 and Office 2016. So definitely do your research and look at the beta release for Office 2016 and the changes coming there as well as the roadmap sites. If you go to the Office blogs or the Windows blogs, they're pretty good at announcing what's coming. So with that, I'm going to go over and check the Q&A tab. And if you have any questions, or if there's a specific feature or function, in 54 minutes, it's hard to cover everything. But if there's a specific feature or function or question you have about the philosophy or goal, definitely swap over to the Q&A tab and put it in, and I'm happy to answer them and address them.
Chris, while you're looking at the Q&A tab, I just wanted to let everyone know I did receive a few emails from registrants who said they wouldn't be able to attend today's webinar. So just to repeat ourselves a little bit here, we recorded this webinar and it will be posted up to our website most likely later this afternoon, if not first thing tomorrow morning. So if anyone wants to come back and rewatch specific bits, share the webinar with colleagues, what have you, please know that you can check out our website under the events section. Just go to the webinars area and you'll see an embedded video on the page where you can go ahead and rewatch this session or any previous sessions that we've run. That's really all I wanted to throw in there, though.
Excellent. And so feel free to throw any questions in there. The other thing I would actually, I'll offer up to you guys is sort of the first. So Ryan and I have been working, I'm going to do a webcast series this fall. I'm going to put together a 6 or 8 week series because this fall is going to be fairly exciting between Windows 10 launching, Skype for Business, Exchange 2016, SharePoint 2016, the new version of System Center, the new version of Server, the upgrades to Azure. We're kind of going to have a mass rollout over the next 6 to 8 months of all of these various applications. If there's a particular application or function or thing that you would like to see in an upcoming webcast, also feel free to put that in the Q&A section. Let us know that there's a particular application, feature, or function. You guys took the time to join us today. We want to make these as valuable for you as possible. So definitely put in any suggestions you have for future webcasts or webinars on upcoming applications, features, or functions, or things you'd like to see, so that we can put those together for you and make sure you get that information as well. Again, a lot coming on. Office 2016, that's the biggest thing I hope you walk away from today is the philosophy change inside of Microsoft of really trying to keep people on the latest and greatest, really trying to move away from that ancientware mentality that some people have stuck with, very understandably in some cases not as understandably, but some cases very understandably. But get you away from that ancientware mindset and make it easier for you to stay on the latest and greatest. Definitely worth a conversation or a one-off if you're the kind of company that skips every other version of Exchange, right? You only release it after it's been out for 2 or 3 years. That's definitely you're the kind of company I want to talk to and help you work through how to swap from that mode to this new world Microsoft is in. Today they still are going to have on-prem versions of all the applications, but there's going to come a day where it's really not going to make sense to do that anymore. Even if Microsoft still enables it, it's not going to make sense. We're actually already kind of there, where it doesn't make sense to stay in that mindset anymore. And how do we get you from point A to point B? How do we help you shift the culture of your organization from point A to point B and get you ready for it? All right, not seeing any questions in the Q&A. I'll thank you all very much for your time. Again, any questions or anything, feel free to follow up with us. We'll post this later on, and look forward to some more webcasts coming out on more detail on Windows 10 and as well as all the other applications over the coming months.
All right, thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Take care, everybody.